Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Exodus into chapter 5. Where we left off, we should remember that Moses actually did some of the signs in the sight of the people, and the people believed what Moses said is true. When they heard that God had visited the children of Israel. Now, this word visited, pakat, is literally to visit and in a positive way to rescue them. That he had looked on their affliction towards the end of the 400 years, and their response was in awe and reverence. They bowed their heads or they bowed themselves to the ground and prostrated. Now, that is very important for us to recognize. And as we proceed into chapter 5, it begins this way. After Moses and Aaron, now remember, we have Moses with stammering lips, not able to speak well. And so Moses became the Elohim to Aaron. And so technically, Aaron became the spokesperson or the prophet, one who speaks for the Elohim. And so now we have God speaking to Moses, and then in the earthly and human encounter. And so what we do see is this. Moses and Aaron would be the ones to engage with Pharaoh. So they went in, or they came and spoke to Pharaoh, which would tell us that they would be in the palace. And the speech begins this way. Thus says the Lord God of Israel. Now remember, the prophet always says, thus says the Lord. There is no synthesis. It must be verbatim. Verbatim means as was originally spoken. So Elohim is Moses. Moses speaks to Aaron, and Aaron will recite and tell exactly what God says because Moses represents God. And the speech tells us this: let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. So it's supposed to be send. So this word, let my people go, essentially is to send them away. That would be a much better word. Send away my people, that they may hold a feast. Now, this word feast comes from the word Chagat. This is what we call the word for feast, a festival, a celebration. The idea of celebration in the word here is people will be jumping around, singing songs and going round and round. That would be the picture that Aaron, as he's speaking to the Pharaoh, would have to say. Second part here is, and then after Aaron spoke, and then Pharaoh said. Now, Pharaoh doesn't know God, so he says, who is Jehovah? That I should hear his voice. Right? This is to hear his voice or the sound of what of the speech. And this word to let Israel go is to send them away. And then he says, I do not know Jehovah. Now, this is an Egyptian speaking, and this is an Egyptian who doesn't know Joseph, and so he doesn't know Jehovah. And then he says, and because of this, I will not. So there is a word here. Because it's English uses nor, it would be I will not let Israel go. That was his decision. He couldn't be bothered because he does not recognize Jehovah. He recognized all the other Egyptian gods. And so when you get a Hebrew person coming in to speak to Pharaoh, Pharaoh has no interest because the Hebrew people are the ones that he has placed in oppression to make life difficult for them. Verse 3. Verse 3 is, and then, this would be, and then they said, and who is they? Moses and Aaron. And then they said this, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. This would be uh Elohe ha-Ivrim, the God, the Elohim of the Hebrews. Okay, so this word here is the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please remember, at this point in time, although they are called Israel or children of Israel, like this, to the mind of the Pharaoh, they are the Hebrew people because Israel hasn't become a nation. So they are the children of Jacob by the context. Now, as we go on, he says the God of the Hebrews have met with us, spoke with us, encountered us, and that would be something foreign in the mind of Pharaoh. So he says, please let us go 3 days into the desert. Now, this word journey is a 3-day walk. So we walk for 3 days and we'll go into the midbar, and then we will offer a sacrifice. Now, please understand, offer a sacrifice is to slaughter an animal. To Jehovah, our Elohim. And so now it is clear in the definition, Jehovah is our Elohim. So even if you don't know Jehovah, it doesn't matter because Jehovah, our Elohim, said so. Now, if you don't let us go, then he will fall upon us with pestilence or the sword. Now, this idea of us could be understood in a broader sense. Both Hebrews and Egyptians. That if they don't go out, it will be bad for everyone in the land. That would be a way of looking at things. Now in verse 4, it begins with and then. So we have and then after Aaron had said that, the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you take the people from their work? I have given them work. Go back to your labor. Now in verse 4, it says, why do you get them from their work, the work that they are doing on a daily basis? So it says, get back to your labor. And by labor, it would actually mean burden. Get back to the hard, forced labor that you've been assigned. And Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are many now, and you make them rest from their labor, their burden. This is the word, their burden. And so, because the Pharaoh doesn't recognize God, like here, who is Jehovah, that I should hear his voice? I don't know Jehovah, so I will not let Israel go. And by Israel, it would be the people, right? The people themselves. And so he said to Moses and Aaron, don't disturb me. Let the people go back to do the hard labor. Verse 6. The word so would be and then. We are beginning a series of narratives. So, and then on the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmaster of the people and their officers to say this. Now, the taskmasters are people who drive them to do work, right? The ones who drive, the ones who demand them to do work. The idea of officers are the people who, I guess you could say that they would be the one who note down who works. So we can talk about officers being people who take note who is working and who is not. And both are important. Verse 7, it says, you shall no longer give the people straw to make brick as before. You need both straw and clay to make brick. So now let them go and find their own straw, and you shall lay on them the quota of bricks which they made before, which means that the time spent to gather straw does not lessen the expectation or the expected load. You shall not reduce it, for they are idle. Therefore they cry out, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God. The Pharaoh took the argument from Aaron that they need to go to the wilderness to celebrate. Next, the Pharaoh thinks that they have too much time on their hands. They want to enjoy themselves. So let more work be laid on the men that they may be labor forced to do it, and let them not regard false words, which are the words of Moses and Aaron. Now we come to verse 10. Verse 10 reads this way. And then, this would be and then, the taskmasters of the people and their officers went out and spoke to the people, saying, now in this case, thus says Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh is Elohim. Thus says the Egyptian god, Pharaoh. I will not give you straw. Go get straws for yourself where you can find it, yet none of your work will be reduced. That's the so-called punishment. In verse 12, it continues. The word so is and then. And then the people were scattered abroad throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. Now, this idea of stubble would be chaff, the husk of the wheat. So instead of straw, which is grass, dried grass, which now they have different material to make bricks. And their taskmaster forced them to hurry, saying, fulfill your work, your daily quota, as when there was straw. Now you got to do both. Find the straw and make the bricks. Verse 14 also is, and then the officers of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmaster had set over them, they were beaten and were asked. Now, this is a problem. The officers of the children of Israel, as officers, they were beaten by the taskmasters. It says, why have you not fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today as before? Verse 15. Then would be, and then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried out to Pharaoh, why are you dealing thus with your servants? Why are you beating us? There is no straw given to your servants. And then they say to us, make brick. And indeed, your servants are beaten, but the fault is in your own people. They are not being fair. Little did they know that this came from Pharaoh. Now, this word here, but he said, verse 17 would be, and then he said. The comments are such. You are idle. Idle. Now, idle means to be slack. This is to be slack. In other words, it means that they are too relaxed. They have nothing much to do. Now, that would be the idea. You are all too relaxed, idle. Therefore, you say, let us go and sacrifice to Jehovah. Now, it appears to us now that the officers are Hebrew. How can we know? Because of what Pharaoh say, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord, includes these officers. And so Pharaoh proclaims to them, go now and work, for no straw shall be given you, yet you shall deliver the same amount of bricks. And then the officers, this is what is, and then the officers of the children of Israel saw that they were in trouble after it was said, and the message is, you shall not reduce any brick from your daily quota. Life is now harder, right? Harder. Verse 20. Then, this would be, and then. As they came out of Pharaoh, they met Moses and Aaron, who stood there to meet them, which appears to be outside the palace walls. Verse 21. And then they said to them, let the Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us abhorrent in the sight of Pharaoh, in the sight of his servants, who put a sword in their hand to kill us. Now, the word seems to be a bit more extreme, but they are very afraid of Pharaoh. This is the picture we are given. They are so afraid that the Pharaoh may get so angry and kill them all. And now they have made their lives very miserable because the quota to make bricks didn't change, but he now needs more time to look for straw. We now come to our last passage here, verse 22. Remember, verse 22, these are all words which is part of the narrative. This is an and then. After the officers came to complain to Moses, Moses returned to the Lord and said, return means went back. Went back to the Lord and said, now observe these words, Lord. The word here, Lord, is Adonai. Adonai. Adonai means my Lord. But the sound of I instead of E, right? The other word would be Adoni. This is Adonai. And same meaning, my Lord, and this one refers to God. And that's how we distinguish the use of the word Adon, Adoni, my Lord, Adonai, my Lord. But Adonai, as the sound goes with the R sound, references to God Himself. That would be the way that it is understood. Why have you brought trouble on this people, your people, the children of Israel, the Hebrew people? The second part is this: why have you sent me? Now remember, the idea of send also carries a meaning. The word send comes from the word shalak. It is to send out, to represent the one who sent. So Moses is now saying, God Adonai, why did you send me? Why did you send me to represent you? So we remember this, right? It would be Jehovah speaks to Moses, and Moses is the Elohim. He speaks to Aaron, who speaks to the people. And so, why did you send me to tell them about your plans? For since I came, now this word, for since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name. Now, this is a very crucial word. I came to speak in your name. Remember, it is Aaron who spoke. But even if Aaron spoke, it is like Moses speaking. Moses told Aaron and Aaron spoke. It is like Moses speaking. That's why he says, for I came to Pharaoh to speak to him, but I speak in your name. And hereby we need to understand. When you say in the name of Jehovah, this actually means in the authority, in the character, in the power of Jehovah. It is as good as Jehovah speaking, but it's Moses who is actually speaking. The verse continues. He, that is Pharaoh, so we need to match all this, has done evil to this people. Remember the word evil. Evil is always seen from the eyes of the beholder. This people is seeing Pharaoh as doing evil, meaning Pharaoh has made life more difficult to this people. That's why it's called evil, Ra. Now, the second part here says this, and have not, and have you delivered your people at all. Now, the last part here says this, you have not, you better say this, you have not delivered or saved your people. All right. So that would be a better way of saying, more positive way. It says, he, the Pharaoh, has done evil to this people, Israel, and you have not saved your people at all. So all of this that God told Moses to say to Pharaoh, to let my people go, it appears that Moses did not pay close attention to what God has said. So now, briefly, his comment is that I've gone to Pharaoh and it didn't work. Pharaoh ignored me, ignored everything you said. He didn't know you. And that is where we are now. Now, understand that Moses actually spoke to Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh. So Moses spoke to Pharaoh. And who is Pharaoh? Pharaoh is an Elohim. And so Moses and Pharaoh are now equals. God made Moses the Elohim to Aaron. And by Elohim, he would have all the authority in his hands. Pharaoh has all the authority in his hands. So Moses came to represent the children of Israel. And Aaron was the spokesperson. But nevertheless, both are now seen as Elohim. But now, when Pharaoh ignored everything that Moses had said and made life more difficult for the people, and Moses is now shocked. What happened? Why did Pharaoh not respond positively? We need to now go back to the passage where God spoke to Moses to tell him what would happen right up front. We come back to chapter 3. The people would heed his voice. And then Moses and Aaron would go to Pharaoh, saying exactly this: the Lord of the God of the Hebrews have met us, and now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God, to Jehovah our God. One of the things that Moses forgot was the next verse. But I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, unless, and we should remember when we were here, we had this, unless by a mighty hand. And then God will stretch out his hand and strike Egypt with all the supernatural wonders which I will do in its midst. And after all this, he will let you go. So when we are now in chapter 5, it is only here. And then God says, I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. And so not only that he didn't let them go, he made life more difficult. But it was expected because God had anticipated the Pharaoh would refuse to budge. The Pharaoh would not recognize God. And so there must be a period where God needs to educate the Pharaoh. And we will see that in the coming chapters. But the fulfillment would be this: God says, I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my supernatural wonders to do in its midst. That is what we are going to see in the coming chapters, because the king of Egypt will not let you go, and he has to see that the God of the Hebrews is real and powerful, greater than any of the Elohim in Egypt, and that the Pharaoh will surrender and let the people go or send the people away. And with this, we come to the end of our chapter today.